Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. You're here for the negative space panel. Appreciate you all. We'll get started here in about 2 seconds. I'm Nawel. I'm a co-founder here at Negative Space, and I just want to open up and say hello and throw out some quick announcements for anyone that's watching now or later. We just want to remind everyone of some of the cool stuff we have going on at Negative Space. First of all, if you want to see more panels like this, you can find them at negativespacecomics.com/events. And you will be able to find the recordings on YouTube and soon to be on a podcast as well. We also have a current competition open right now, a short comics competition, which closes on Saturday, October 1st. We announced it a few days ago that the winner will actually get to be published in our first anthology in an actual book. So we're hoping that everyone hears about that one because it's a big one. And speaking of the book, we have our first anthology crowdfunding campaign opening up in a week. You can find out more if you sign up for our newsletter, if you're following us on social media, but it'll be through Zoop, so you can find everything on there. I'll put the link in the chat in a little bit, but we are super excited to be publishing our winners, our finalists, mentors, judges. Handful of our finalists and winners are actually being published for the first time, and some of these comic book creators are ready for the next level and ready to be out in the world. So keep an eye out for that. In a week, we'll be launching the crowdfunding campaign, and we obviously would love everyone's support and everyone to share that. So enough of me. I will now hand it off to Josh Sippie, our director of content, if I believe I got the title right. It's very new. So hand it over to Josh and he'll take it from here. So I'll see you all later.
Thank you, Nawel. Yes, you got the title correct. So thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. As you said, my name is Josh Sippie. I'm the director of content at Negative Space. And we're happy that you joined us today. So today we're going to be talking about creative partnerships by discussing with two creatives who have exactly that. So let's meet our guests. First, we have Nicole Goux. Nicole is an Eisner Award nominated illustrator and cartoonist from Los Angeles. She's the artist of DC's Shadow of the Batgirl and co-creator of Fuck Off Squad at Silver Sprocket Bicycle Club. She has also been published by DC, Dark Horse, IDW, LionForge, and has an upcoming comic, Forest Hills Bootleg Society, debuting at Simon and Schuster in 2022, tomorrow, actually. So hello, Nicole. Hello, thank you for being here. And then our second guest, Dave Baker. Dave is an Eisner-nominated writer and illustrator. His works include Fuck Off Squad, Star Trek Voyager, Seven's Reckoning, Night Hunters, and Everyone is Tulip. His next release is a YA graphic novel, Forest Hills Bootleg Society, which, as you just heard, comes out tomorrow. Dave, welcome aboard.
Hey, yay, yay, yay.
There it is. I asked for that specifically, so thank you, Dave, for doing that. Yeah, thank you both for being here. So I want to start, at the beginning, which is always the best place to start, to talk about your creative partnership, how it formed, and how it's evolved over the years, and where it is now. So your first collaboration, if I'm not mistaken, was the Fuck Off Squad. How did you two find each other to work on this? Did you know each other previously? Did you always want to work together, or how did that partnership come about?
Do you want to take it, or do you want me to?
Sure. Yeah. So we actually met at like a gallery showing through mutual friends. And our first collaboration actually was not Fuck Off Squad. It was Dave's book called Action Hospital, which is a kind of like an overarching sci-fi story that has these little chapters that are drawn by different artists. Dave draws most of it, but I think it's at least 6 other cartoonists. We often would have characters who show up in other people's stories, and they would still be drawn by that same person on the page. So it was a very collaborative process. But we met just through mutual friends. I was, I think, doing the illustration for Mattel. Dave was writing and drawing comics and working as a freelance writer. And I, at the time, I had been really into comics as like a preteen, early teenager, but I hadn't considered doing it for many, many years. I was trying to get in to do illustration. And so Dave basically asked me, do you want to do this comic with me? And I said very flatly, no, I don't really have any interest in that. I'm trying to make a career over here. That sounds hard. And as much as I like comics, I hadn't read them in a while. And, you know, between Dave being a charming, convincing human and us going to some like zine fests and other comics art events where I was able to kind of expand my idea of what comics were. Because like when I was a kid, it was manga, which I was really into, or the superhero comics that my brother was really into. And as an adult, neither of those fit exactly what I felt like I wanted to make. And so once I saw that it could be so much more expansive than that, I was like, all right, let's try it. I have some time. Let's do a short, I think it's 8-page comic. And ever since then, Dave and I have been making stuff. I think I really got hooked when we started doing little mini zine fests ourselves and selling comics to other people and having that interaction between reader and consumer and artist, which is really fantastic.
So Dave, it was you that reached out first to sort of work together. What was it that drew you to her work that made you think you would work well together?
Well, there's a simple answer and there's a long answer. The long answer is she's really good. She's really good. You know, it's easy to see somebody who has a lot of potential. And, you know, like Nicole said, you know, I was making Action Hospital basically because I wanted to transition from being just an artist to being a writer primarily. And the easiest way to do that was to kind of make mini comics with my friends. So I was making all of these mini comics with people, and you know, I approached a lot of people who never followed through. I approached a lot of people who did follow through, but we just didn't have the chemistry, or it wasn't, you know, there in the same way, right? You know, how many artists did Stan Lee work with during the 50s before he got to Jack Kirby? And he was like, you're the one, kid. Biff bang pow, let's do this. And of the two of us, Nicole is definitely the Jack Kirby. This is actually a toupee. This is not real. And,
where's your giant sunglasses?
I mean, these aren't that far off.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so, you know, we were at, the day we met at this kind of, you know, gallery show in Culver City, we went, her and me and a bunch of other kind of cartoonist friends of ours all went to a restaurant, and we were all playing Exquisite Corpse, you know, the game where you like draw on top of each other and stuff. And there was, somebody drew a guy doing this, and Nicole put a shake weight in his hand, and I was like, I'll see your shake weight, and I'll raise you a creative partnership that will define and crush us both. And we both died of crushing poverty, and it was great.
I feel like all good partnerships begin with the shake weight, so that sounds right on.
That shake weight damned me to a life of comics.
Yeah. So yeah, it was pretty soon after that we started doing. We made a couple longer books, and then Fuck Off Squad was kind of the first big, oh, we're really gonna like do this book.
So when did it dawn on you that you worked well together? Was it during Fuck Off Squad where you're like, okay, this is something that has legs? Like we have the same kind of artistic vision. We work really well together. Was that right about when it started to settle in?
I would say probably, so we did this mini comic after that first initial book that we did called This Is Not a Girl Gang. And essentially Dave and I had started, you know, hanging out as friends. I was working in Beverly Hills and living in Huntington Beach, and it was way too far. So I was sleeping on his couch like multiple times a week. So we were just spending all this time together. And we, for my birthday one year, decided to take a spontaneous trip to the Grand Canyon, where we left at like, I don't know, 4 p.m. and slept in our car in the cold and went to the Grand Canyon for like an hour and then just drove right back. But we decided to make a mini 3-panel strip comic out of that, because it was, you know, just so many funny little things were happening on the trip, and he would come up with an idea for a strip, and I would come up with an idea for a strip, or he would write stuff down and I would draw them, and it just felt really collaborative and really like we were on the same page in the type of stories we wanted to tell and the type of jokes we were interested in. And we printed that, and that was our first thing that we had printed together that we sold there's a show that no longer exists because Meltdown Comics in LA closed down, but there was a little tiny show called Z Melt that was just in the back parking lot. I think it was like $15 to table. And that was, I think, our first real back and forth collaboration, because it was like, 8 pages of a story that Dave wrote and I drew, and really my first comic of any length. I think I had drawn like a 1-page comic before that. And then this, we were able to kind of share ideas about story in a way that was new for me.
Yeah, I think we're also just kind of both interested in the same stuff. We're very interested in like character development, in kind of the quotidian existence of modern life, and these kind of like exploring the intricacies and almost like the romantic tension of just existing in life, and how mundanity and these kind of heightened emotional peaks and valleys play out over this course of somebody's life, especially at the point usually when they're in their early 20s or teenager years. I think Nicole and I are very interested in that stuff, and we spent a lot of time talking about that stuff. And our process at this point is like, we both talk about the idea, and then we go and play catch in the park with fucking baseballs, and we just like throw the ball back and forth and just like yell at each other about like, no, there should be more kissing in the third act.
Which that's oh, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, that character definitely wouldn't do that, or what if they did this? That kind of stuff.
There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of baseball, catch, screaming about characters not smooching enough. I always want things to be always like super sad and fucked up, and Nicole's like, yeah, but that needs to be the end point. We need to show them being friends first. Like the note that Nicole typically has about most of our books, at some point over the course of the creation, it'll always be like, yeah, but you got to show them being friends. We got to show them having fun together. And I'm like, no.
Well, because it makes it more sad if you feel the difference between the friendship and then the heartbreak. Like, come on. No, that is something every time we work on something, there's like a moment of like, everybody's too sad all the time. Let's add some fun and personality and connection first.
Yeah.
Which he's great at. He's great at writing that stuff. But I think first drafts tend to be like, how much sad can we shove into here?
Yeah. I mean, in our current book, there's even, and sometimes it's not like the delineation between who does what isn't, I don't think it's as black and white as maybe people think it is. And like Nicole writes stuff in the books too. And sometimes I give very detailed, like, no, this is exactly what it needs to be. And I'll draw out the panel and then she'll draw. Or sometimes there's like, sometimes we have like a shorthand where I'll just be like, just do the thing that I do where there's a ton of little tiny panels, and she knows exactly what that means. Or, just do the thing where you do the Nicole Goux sad girl with the hair blowing thing, where it's just like somebody looking off in the distance, hair just like wafting in the breeze thing.
Yeah, we've worked together enough at this point that we like have a bunch of shorthand. We just know what the other person is expecting, really.
Yeah.
You both got into my next question, which was going to be sort of seeing the creative process between you two. And I feel like we got a window into that just through that discussion. But I want to go back to sort of how it's evolved, because I'm sure you weren't always that organically, on the same path. So whenever you first started working together, was there like, I'm sure there were disagreements. How did you handle it, and how has that evolved over time to make this partnership more fluid?
Not that there's never any tension or disagreements or anything, but usually the only real tension comes when Dave says, what if we do this outlandish idea? And I say, I don't want to draw that. And then he spends the next couple of weeks convincing me that it is something that I want to draw. Usually, like, as long as there is like a really human element to it, a really like sad girl story about growing up, I can usually be convinced. There's been projects or ideas that I say, you should find another artist for that. But most of the time he's pretty good at convincing me.
Yeah, I think the only real like growing period, it was just like in the very beginning when we started making comics. Maybe Nicole wasn't as analytical about the language of comics when she had been reading as like a preteen or a teenager. So there would just be like, sometimes I would point out stuff of just like, oh, you know, this would work better if it had gutters, or it would work better if this was like on the left-hand side, so it would be a page turn, or, you know, just kind of stuff like that. But that wasn't even really a growing pains. It was really, she pretty much immediately would be like, actually, that's not true. Nicole's reaction whenever I say something like that is to go, no, that's not true. And then sit there for like 30 seconds and go, well, maybe you're right.
No. I don't do that. I say, no, that's the way I want it. And then you go away and I just secretly do it and don't tell you.
Yes, that's true. And then I pretend like I didn't notice it. And even though I do notice it, and I'm like, that was changed to the way I said it. And then we just move on. We just move on.
Well, and sometimes it really is the way that I wanted it. So, you know.
And there are sometimes where I'll bring up like, have you thought about doing that a different way? And Nicole will just be like, no, I don't like that. And then we just won't do it. So it kind of, you know, it's a back and forth. It's a back and forth. But in terms of the like process stuff, like, I don't know when we started. It's always been very back and forth, the conversation, but I feel like it shifted into high gear whenever we first started doing the baseball stuff and the live reads. I don't remember when did we start doing that, Nicole?
Probably for Tulip, I would say. Initially, so like the first, the This Is Not a Girl Gang, the road trip thing, that was fairly back and forth collaborative in terms of story and a little bit writing. But the first couple things, Action Hospital, Fuck Off Squad, they were a little bit more Dave writes, Nicole draws. And as we just spent more time together and worked together, and I got more confident in comics, because I feel like the learning curve for me was fairly steep, because I already had the illustration skills. I went to school for illustration. I'd been drawing. Honestly, I've been in drawing classes since I was a little kid, like 2. I started doing life drawing in high school, 14 years old. So I had the basic drawing skills, but I didn't have the language of comics yet, because it had been 10 years since I had really engaged in them. And so as soon as I started to kind of learn the language of comics and of storytelling, I think that's when things started to get a little bit more back and forth in terms of story, and in terms of us just hanging out and talking about a book for months. Actually, I would say we took a trip in, I want to say 2017, to Thought Bubble in Leeds in England. And we had thought of the rough pitch for Everyone is Tulip before we left, but we spent the 2 weeks traveling and being there. We went from Leeds to Paris, back to London, and then came home. We spent that whole time talking about the story that we wanted to tell before Dave ever put anything on paper. And I think that is when I would say the beginning of the real back and forth story collaboration started.
Yeah, and the process for Tulip, we didn't have the baseball stuff yet, but we did have. I would write a draft, then we would sit down in your apartment. I would read the scene direction, and you would read the characters, and you would like perform it, and we would like go through it beat by beat, like reading the whole thing. And then as we were reading it, you know, you would have an idea for a line, or I would be like, oh, that section fucking sucks. That doesn't work at all. And so I would be like live editing it and like leaving notes for myself for the next draft as we were doing it.
Yeah, I mean, so much of telling stories and drawing comics is about the acting. So if you can't perform it, I mean, at least be able to see it in your head. I guess you don't have to actually be able to perform it, but like you have to be able to see it in your head and understand the emotions and the intent of the characters. And so for me, live reading it really makes me understand whether it works as a story and whether those characters would do that and feel that way, and whether there's enough friendship happening or sadness happening or jokes happening or whatever it is, you know. And so I think that is a type of working collaboration that I've now started to pull into other working relationships as well, because I find it really helpful.
I find it so interesting that you know, now it's like you're both writers and you're both illustrators at the same, like, so it makes me even more curious how you split the responsibilities then, like, because you said at the beginning Dave was writing, Nicole was illustrating. When did that sort of start crossing over, and how did you share responsibilities for writing, or was it always like for specific projects, you'll write this one, you'll write that one, or how did you sort of, because, you know, how did it not get clustered with 2 writers and 2 illustrators? How did you like lineate who was doing what?
So the projects that we do together, I almost always draw because Dave is a stronger writer than me. And the types of stories that we tell together are not necessarily the types of stories that he wants to draw or wants to tell with other people. Like, he has a pretty broad range of, you know, science fiction and sci-fi and cyberpunk and all kinds of stuff. Night Hunters is amazing, but I could not have drawn Night Hunters. You know, and the stories that I want to tell fall more in line with the things that we're doing together. So normally I draw them. We have had some discussions about switching that up in the future, but that hasn't really happened yet. And I would say that the division of labor is more, we write together in the sense that we break story together, we discuss, we plan and plot together, but the actual typing, other than like, sometimes I'll add a scene or change some dialogue or move things around. But for the most part, Dave is doing the typing and I'm doing the drawing.
Yeah, and there's also just a, like, when I work with another artist, I want to make something that's tailored to the strengths of that artist, you know? Like, I think of it almost kind of like the artist is the star, you know, they're the actor, Nicole's the Tom Cruise, I'm the Christopher McQuarrie, right? I'm the one that's like, all right, no, you're totally Tom Cruise. You're definitely Tom Cruise.
Great, thanks. I will try and take that as a compliment.
No, you're 100%. You kidding? The daring, death-defying feats that you do hanging out of airplanes and stuff
We do that
while
all the
drawing
time.
comics. It's basically, you know, that. But like those, but the reason I say specifically Tom Cruise is because he's like the last movie star, and those Mission Impossible movies are tailored to him. He's the one that comes in and says, I want to hang off the Burj Khalifa. I want to jump off of Mount Everest. I want to hang out of a helicopter and then like jump to another helicopter. And then Christopher McQuarrie takes that and makes a movie where they hit those things that Tom Cruise wants to do. And that's how I think about writing for artists, because I am an artist, and when I write for myself, that's exactly what I do. I'm like, I want to draw a dinosaur, I want to draw a Merlin, I want to draw this giant flaming sword. How do I make a story out of those that cocktail of elements? And for Nicole, it's a very the tropes of the stories that we make together are, you know, people coming of age, sad, intimate, you know, portraits of people who are trying to find human connection, which is what if I had my druthers, I would draw those stories. I would be an Adrian Tomine style illustrator, but the way I draw it just isn't that. Like, I can't draw like the interior of an apartment and make it look cool. It just looks shitty. So I got to put like wires and laser guns and like, you know, dudes with metal arms and shit. Yeah, did that answer your question? I don't even know.
It did, yeah, and it brought up another one too, because I always admire when artists are so self-aware, where they know where their limitations end and where someone else's can feed into theirs. So has it always been, I mean, obviously it hasn't always been that way, but I'm curious, you guys like have such a very clear image of, yes, this is a Dave and Nicole project, and yes, this isn't. Like, is there, you mentioned how sometimes Dave can talk you into it, but is there a lot of wiggle room there? Or is it, at this point, I feel like it's pretty, it sounds organic enough that you just know right off the bat if this is a project you're going to work on together or not. Is that the case?
For the most part, I would say it's the case. There are times when, like, Dave has been pitching this baseball comic to me for a while. Do I really want to draw baseball and that sort of action? Not really, but is it maybe going to be a story about girls joining a boys baseball team, and like some of them are gay and there's kissing and then somebody gets broken up with? Okay, maybe I'll draw this comic. You know, like there are, I think so far we have kind of kept the box pretty small of, it is slice of life. It is mostly modern. Forest Hills is obviously a period piece, but it's like 2005, so whatever. I think the box has been pretty small. I don't think that those are the final limitations of our box. I think there are other stories. Like, I'm someone who loves sci-fi and fantasy and period pieces, like give me Pride and Prejudice every day. And I would absolutely draw those things. It's just that, like, these are the stories we've told so far and that have felt most relevant and most prescient to what we're working with and what we want to tell. I don't think there's a limit to the stories that we tell. I think there are things that are going to be harder for me. Like, is it going to be a stretch for me to draw like a full sci-fi city? Yeah. Am I kind of excited about the idea of pushing my limits and trying to do that? Yeah, also. So I think that, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, also, there's the other added kind of mathematical equation on all of this is like, what can we sell?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really like, it's frustrating, but that is that's a key component in, right now, for better or for worse, the types of stories that Nicole and I are naturally drawn to, there is a place in the market for them, more or less. Usually we get pressured to kind of age it down a little bit and make it like, oh no, they're in high school or they're in junior high, where Nicole and I, our instinct is probably to be like, oh, they're like just out of high school, or they're like in college, or they're like just have left college. But you can take most of those stories and kind of just compress it down a little bit and it's fine. But maybe there'll be a situation in 5 years where all of a sudden fucking some giant publisher comes to us and like, we really want a pirate comic, kid. And then Nicole and I are like, we got a pirate comic for you. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think initially we both had day jobs, and so we were less dictated by that stuff. We never would have made Fuck Off Squad and called it Fuck Off Squad if we were trying to sell it to someone. I just don't know that would have happened, or that we'd even have tried. And so there is more creative freedom, I think, when you are on your own. We were self-publishing for a long time, and now that this is my full-time job, we're a little bit more dictated by the needs or wants of the market. We still find ways to still tell stories that we want to tell within that, because, like Dave said, it's not that far off from what we're already doing. But we also, if there's something that's a little outside what we think will sell in the book market, which is where the actual money is, then it's not necessarily going to stop us from making it. The book that we're working on right now, we're doing at Dark Horse because they give us a little bit more creative freedom. So the direct market, the comic book market is just they're a little bit more ready to tell adult stories because they've been doing it for so long. And the book market is just like, you get 8 to 14. Those are the ages, which I think is going to change. That's just what's booming right now. Everybody's a little bit risk averse. But as those kids get older, they're going to need older stories. So
y'all are really good at segueing into my next point of conversation, which is going to be how your partnership has sort of changed now that, because the Forest Hills Bootleg Society, which we're going to talk about here more in a bit, it's being published through an offshoot of Simon and Schuster, Athenian Books. So that's more the traditional publishing route. How was the creation process for that different? Were there more hands in the pot trying to dictate what happened than you had previously been used to?
Yes and no. I think so. Forest Hills is the first book that we took to our agent, Charlie. And I think its initial iteration was fairly different than what it is now. And it has gone through stages of change based on what Charlie thought would sell, or after we had taken it. Because we originally took it out, I think I want to say 2016, maybe 2017. Which is a long time ago. And, it didn't really do much, but we gave it a second go later with some alterations, some notes from Charlie, some notes from editors who had read the pitch and said, it's like almost there, but maybe do this or that. So I think most of that dictation came in like pitch level, So once we were really sitting down to write it, we had the freedom within the box of the requirements we had been kind of like steered
And
towards
frankly,
the pitch.
even those requirements, like for anybody who doesn't know, the book is about a group of friends in 2005 who find a bunch of bootleg anime DVDs and start burning them on their home DVD burner, and then distributing these illicit materials around their conservative Christian boarding school, and hijinks ensue. And so the comic is kind of about, you know, the intimacy of friendships that you have in high school, about how it feels like there's no real comeuppance or there's no real external situations that you're really going to come up. You know, I'm failing with the words. Oh my God. The stuff you do in high school doesn't have ramifications on the rest of your life, is basically what it feels like. But the further you get into high school, the more things start getting more serious and more serious. And that kind of plays out over the course of the story, where the network of friends starts to fracture, and the relationships between these different people start becoming warped by this activity of selling these burned DVDs of anime. And you know, so the book itself is, I think when we sold it, when we started pitching it initially, it was very in your face. There were some extreme elements about it. And then as we started pitching it, those elements started getting kind of sanded down. And then as we started making the book, I think it actually kind of got more extreme again in different areas, where it's just like, when you're telling somebody, and then there's going to be a bunch of scenes where teenage boys jerk off to sexy anime, they're going to be like, no, no.
Yeah,
But
traditional publishing doesn't like that.
No. But then in execution, in the book, where you see how it's handled and you understand the contexts of the characters and where they're at, it didn't get taken out. Like, I mean, it's in the book, which I'm still shocked about. Like, it's in this book put out by Simon and Schuster. There's literally a double-page spread where these boys are enjoying some self-pleasure, which is amazing.
Honestly, it's not dissimilar to Dave pitching me a book and me being like, oh, that's a little outside my range. And then, you know, when you sit down and talk about what it actually is, talk about what it's really about, that changes the conversation. And that is what can be so difficult about pitching, is because you have to sell yourself on like one page and maybe some characters. And so much of storytelling is about tone and execution, and it's so hard to express that in a one-page synopsis of a story. Look at something like, for example, have you ever seen the movie Before Sunrise? That is a movie that is about a couple who meets on a train, spends one amazing night together in Prague, and then leaves with the promise of meeting again in 10 years. That doesn't sound like an exciting movie, but it is a gorgeous movie. It is so well done. It is so well directed. It is so well acted. It's so emotionally poignant. So, like, you know, if you tell, especially when you're talking to editors who they need to convince their superiors, they need to convince the sales team, they need to make sure that none of the this nicely, overprotective mothers are happy. They have all these boxes that they need to check, and you are one of hundreds of pitches that they're seeing. So being able to sell an idea without it being like poppy or like within their range of like safety, it can be tricky. And so sometimes you write a pitch that fits into the box that they've set up, and then once you start writing the thing, you go a little outside that box and make it what you really want to make it.
And
if you're lucky,
I don't even think that that's like a dishonest or underhanded thing. It's just sometimes you can have an outline that you say, we're going there, but then when you're making the story, sometimes it just naturally goes here, and that's not an underhanded or kind of lascivious, like, it's just
if you have an editor who believes in you and thinks that you're good at what you do, they will let you take those offshoots, off roads. And we were fortunate enough to have an editor who did that, you know.
Our editor Julia McCarthy was great. She was a real defender of the book and really got what it was And frankly was like maybe the only person who got what it was. Like we went through multiple rounds of pitching at multiple publishers, and ultimately everyone was kind of like, I don't know, would kids really sell burn sexy DVDs? I don't know. And the moment we met Julia in the meeting for our first pitch meeting for the book, she was like, oh my God, I literally did this in high school. And I was like, let's do this. Let's hang out.
Yeah, a thing that they don't tell you about editors is that you have to sell yourself to the editor, but the editor has to sell you to the rest of the team. And so your editor has to really believe in your book to get anything made. And so I think usually by the time you're actually making something, you're working with someone who cares about the story that you're going to tell.
Yeah, y'all brought up so many good points I want to get back to. The first one is this project was a long time in the making. You said you went back to 2016. What made you stick with it? What made you, as especially as a team, you know, you two work together a lot. What made you stick with this one and made you say like this is worth it?
I think it's a little bit complicated of a question, but I think, you know, Dave and I had taken a little break after Fuck Off Squad to go work on Shadows of Batgirl with Sarah Kuhn at DC. And that was great. And for better or for worse, that opened up some doors for us. And so when our agent was like, do you guys want to take out some more pitches? Do you have more stories? Again, we were kind of trying to find something that fit into the realm of what we thought would sell. And so we could have come up with a new idea. We have plenty of them, but we already had this pitch partially made. It just needed to be massaged a little bit. We already had some pitch pages for it. And I think we both still believed in the story. You know, it was a story that we wanted to tell. It just got backburnered for a while. And it was something that we both felt like we wanted to make fit in the market that we were trying to be in. And was just one of those things, you know, you have all these stories that sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't work out, sometimes you haven't had time to make them yet, but you still want to tell that story. And so when we had this opportunity to take stuff out again, I think we both were like, Forest Hills? Yeah. So.
I think also stylistically, Forest Hills has a caption mechanic in it that's very similar to the caption mechanic in Fuck Off Squad. And you know, we had just, you know, Nicole did Shadow of the Batgirl, and then we were wrapping up on Everyone is Tulip. And that mechanic is not in Tulip. And I really was like, I just feel like we haven't done everything we need to do with this mechanic yet, this modality of telling stories. And I think if we do it right, it could really connect with people and be a real big game changer and add something to the lexicon of comics that isn't standard in North America, because no one else is doing it. Like, do captions exist? Yes. Are they just usually a means by which for clunky exposition to be told to us through gritted teeth narrator? Usually. And that's not what this specific caption mechanic does at all. It's like the exact opposite of it. And
yeah, I think the combination of not having played out that mechanic to its fullest extent, like Dave was saying, we still wanted to do more of it and play with that more. And the fact that Fuck Off Squad is put out by a publisher called Silver Sprocket Bicycle Club, and they are an incredible indie publisher who just keeps growing and growing. Like, they're going to be giant very, very soon. But they are an indie publisher who is a bit on the smaller side, and their print runs and distribution are a bit on the smaller side. And so we wanted to be able to explore that mechanic on a larger platform, you know? So having a book out from Simon and Schuster, there's just so many eyes that are going to have access to it and see it. It's going to be in Barnes and Nobles everywhere. Actually, so is Fuck Off Squad.
Yeah, but it was on a much smaller scale. Like,
it is a much smaller scale.
Everywhere, it's going to be everywhere. The Fuck Off Squad stuff was like, it was in a couple. It was in some Barnes and Nobles.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, they got it they have international distribution for Fuck Off Squad in a bunch of countries I never would have expected it to be in, which I think is incredible. But it is not the same level as Simon and Schuster, where it's going to be in maybe some book clubs and libraries everywhere, and you know, it's just a different level of exposure to the public, and we wanted to be able to do that and play with that in a place that more people would be able to see it.
Mhm. And then something we kind of glossed over is that you're both rep by the same agent, which is not surprising at all since you come as a package. But I'm curious how that came about too. Did one of you get the offer and you were like, no, they're coming too? Or did it come to both of you? How did that work out?
Let me just say here,
I'll let you take this.
Nicole is the money, all right? Everyone loves Nicole. 9 times out of 10, Nicole is the one that's invited to the dance, and I'm there as the nice wallflower and gets to steal the show in the last moments. But Nicole is everything. This is what I was kind of saying in the beginning when we first met each other, and I kind of was like, oh, you. Like, that's a bunch of times where people from disparate walks of the industry have been like, oh, you, about Nicole specifically. Like, she's a consummate professional. She's super talented, and she has a work ethic like a motherfucker, which most people in comics struggle with. It myself included. Like, it's really hard to do this at a very high level for a prolonged period of time. And Nicole is somebody she's in the fucking trenches, and people see that about. And so we were at Small Press Expo in 2016, 15, 14, 13, 17, 18, 20. Who the fuck knows what year anymore? We were at SPX. We were at SPX, and this guy comes over, nice guy. He's like, hey, oh, I like your stuff. These are really cool. Oh, can I buy this mini comic? Oh, this is really neat. Are you represented? And Nicole was like, she didn't even know what to do with that. She was like, what does that even mean? And he was like, oh, you know, do you have an agent? No. You were like, I don't know what that means. And he was like, do you have an agent? And she was like, oh, no. And he's like, would you like one? And she was like, okay, let's talk. So then the like Monday or Tuesday after that SPX, we got on Skype, or I think it was Skype because it was before Zoom.
Yeah.
We got on Skype, we all talked, and it was kind of a thing where it was like, oh, you guys come together, you work together, you're a writer, you're an artist, you do stuff. Okay, cool. I want to help you guys kind of take things to the next level. Let's do this. What do you got, kid?
Honestly, it was weird because I thought we were going to have to convince him, like, we were going to have this little Zoom interview, and we were going to have to be like, okay, this is who we are, this is who we do, look at this, do you want to represent us, please? And he came into it just being like, I already found you. Like, I've already decided that, yes, if you would like this, I'm going to represent you. And I was very like, oh, this is how this works. But also the thing about him having found me first and blah, 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 and all that stuff is, it is so much easier to analyze and decide whether you like something on a glance when it's artwork. Like, in order to be critical or have any feelings about writing, you have to sit there and read a book, you know, which is like
even just us pitching Tulip, like, we kind of just had to go make Tulip, because how do you pitch that book? Like, it's a book about it's like a coming of age story about a young woman from Arizona who moves to Los Angeles to try and become an actor, but then she gets involved in this weird YouTube performance art troupe thing, and she becomes famous, but it doesn't really go the way she wants. And then she's not really, really famous, but then she's kind of known for being this character online, and it kind of fucks up her personal life. And then it's also kind of about like homaging and art theft, but it's not like it's like an easy story to pitch to somebody. And also, if you haven't read the book, the title is really weird and people get it wrong, and it's like, everyone is Tulip, what kind of fucking title is that? That's not even grammatically correct. Like, what the fuck is this? And it's this weird thing of like a combination of exactly what Nicole's saying, and also sometimes it's just like, you kind of sometimes got to go out and make a thing to be able to show people what it is in order to sell it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. It's, again, the same rule about pitching of like, it's all about tone and execution. And until you've really engaged with that thing, you're not going to know what it is based off a synopsis or a pitch. Like, there could be the most exciting synopsis and it could be a really bland, horrible book. It could be the most boring synopsis and it might be the most beautiful, poignant thing you've ever read. And, you know, like I'm guilty of when I walk around a comics convention or a zine show, there could be 100 beautifully written, beautifully told stories. But if I don't like the art in the first 30 seconds, I'm not going to know, because like, you don't have time to sit there and read the thing. And also maybe you shouldn't, because that person is trying to sell it. But you know, it just is we as humans have this really visceral, immediate reaction to art in a way that you cannot have to writing unless you're, sometimes you pick up a prose book and read the first sentence or whatever, and it's, you know, but it's hard with comics.
So
There are,
go ahead, Dave.
there are very few long time ago in a galaxy far, far ways, you know. It's very
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that joke just fucking bombed. Come on, guys.
You cut out, so that's why.
That's exactly why.
That's why. All right. Never mind. Never mind.
No, it was a good joke. You did cut out, so you know, and it was a good joke.
What you guys don't.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask one last thing about, you know, because once you know, Dave, you made a joke about once you sign with this agent, you know, it was like, oh, we're gonna go to the big time now. So did it feel like anything in the creation process changed? It sounds like it didn't. It sounds like it was still business as usual for you too. You're still telling the stories you want to tell. Do you have more of like do you have to discuss the commercial viability of projects more now, or do you still just kind of go where you want to go?
Yeah,
Both.
unfortunately, we're not telling the stories we want to tell. We always find a way to fit the things and elements that we care about into the smaller than maybe we'd like box that is marketable right now. But now, instead of having a pitch and then like mushing it and squishing it into a box that fits something, which is kind of what happened with, not very much, honestly. The changes for Forest Hills was not very much, but we took something we already had and we tried to like change it into a thing that was going to be marketable. And that can be really hard when you already have an idea. Now we just go into it knowing it kind of has to be these few things. How do we tell a story about the things that we care about within the world that is going to maybe sell, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's much easier to create from the get-go than to take something that you've already thought of and try and fit it into a box it doesn't fit in.
And you know, I mean, you even have to do that when you're expressly doing non-commercial stuff. There's always going to be a master that you have to justify something to. Like I just sold a book to a publisher that I spent many years working on. That it was my reaction to doing some of this more commercial work where I was like, I'm going to do something completely undiluted, 100% non-compromising. I'm going to do my weird literary bullshit over here. And God damn it, I'm going to get it through the system. And I don't know why I had that chip on my shoulder, but I had that chip on my shoulder and it took me forever to get it picked up by a publisher because I set it up so that it would take me forever to get it picked up by a publisher. Like it's the exact thing that was going to happen happened, but ultimately, thankfully it worked out. But it was still one of those situations where at a certain point in time, I was like, why did I do this to myself? Why did I make it hard for me at every juncture?
The only way to have complete creative freedom is to self-publish. If you're doing it yourself, nobody can tell you what to do. The problem with that is that it is much harder to reach a broader range of people. We built our careers on self-publishing. I love self-publishing. Do I ever really want to lay out a book myself again and have to email every retailer that I can find and deal with printers and do all that stuff again? Not really. It's a lot of work. But I also think if we hadn't done that stuff, if we hadn't learned the hard way, our interactions with the systems that are set up and the people who run them would be a lot harder. We would not have the same understanding. We would not have made our name with stories that were undictated by other people. and built a career by making stuff ourselves and taking it to shows and selling it to people and having them respond positively to it, you know? So
I mean,
now
even
we're at a
Tulip, even though it was published through Dark Horse, like we ostensibly self-published that book through Dark Horse, you know, like we own it all. Our editor Connor Knudsen was great, and he, like, you know, found it and championed it internally at Dark Horse, but most of the book was already completed by the time that he took it on, right? So it was like the book was the book, and that's what everybody either gave a thumbs up or thumbs down to. And, you know, I feel very vindicated by that, because we got nominated for a fucking Eisner for it, and we made exactly the book that we wanted to make. And I don't think that we've ever not made exactly the book that we've wanted to make, but there has been junctures where it's like, okay, we have to navigate this circumstance a little bit, that's just the nature of working in an industry, right? Like there's always going to be stuff to navigate.
With Tulip, we did pitch that book to a couple of publishers, and we actually got an offer that we decided not to go with pretty early on. But we were going to make that book whether we got a publisher or not. So we just started. And by the time we met Connor at, I want to say, Emerald City, the book was like halfway done. And he was like, so my roommate gave me Fuck Off Squad. I really liked it. What else you got? And we were like, well, actually, we have this thing. It is halfway done. And so the ship had sailed on like him trying to dictate anything. And so fortunately, Connor is the type of person who wants us to do exactly, he would never try and change what we were making. And like Dave said, he absolutely championed the book internally and let us do whatever we wanted. So that book is exactly the book we wanted to make, with a little bit of distribution help.
So,
but I think you can feel it in the end product though too. Like you read the book and you can feel like whether you like it or not, it's got a perspective. It's trying to do a specific thing. And, you know, according to our Google fucking reads or Goodreads or whatever, some people didn't like it. And a lot of people really did, because it took that chance. You know, there's a big thing that it does. And if you don't like that thing, you might not like the book. But that's the kind of art that I like. That's the art that I relate to, where I'm always like, they really have a perspective and they swung for the fences. I don't know why I'm making so many baseball analogies during this, but you know, whatever, it's fine.
You really want to make that baseball book.
I really do. This is all just me being like, come on, Nicole, let's make this baseball book.
Yeah.
So I want to get to, because there's two really good audience questions from Max. So I want to get to those really quick. First one, a very good question. How would you go about searching for a creative partnership, either as a writer or as an illustrator?
I'd say from the writer's perspective is a little bit harder than the artist. The writer's perspective is there's two ways to do it. You can have money or you can have friends. So if you've got money, awesome. Hit up some artists, see who wants to do work and pay them. If you don't have money, you got to be real nice, go to social functions, go to online forums, post your scripts, try and meet people, do small stuff. Don't try and get an artist that's gonna, you know, like, I mean, that's the thing, you know, Nicole and I have been working together for like 6-7 years, and like we didn't start with a giant 200-page epic. We started with an 8-page comic, and there were a bunch of other people that worked on Action Hospital that I also started with 8-page comics on, and I love all those people, but they didn't turn into giant, you know, co-careers together, right? They're still all my friends, but it's a different thing, you know.
If Dave had asked me to do a 200-page book or even a 90-page book like Fuck Off Squad, initially I would have said no, because I didn't know what the process with him was going to be like. That's a really big commitment. We are working together as a team, so he was not paying me, and that was an agreement that we made because we were trying to build a thing together. Which is super hard to find. I realize that. But a really, really, for artists, it's much easier. I think you basically, you just ask people, like, if you would ever be interested in doing something, I would love to draw a book with you. Here's examples of my work. It can be hard to find the right person. It can be hard to find stories that you care about, but there's always going to be someone who's looking for an artist.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to draw a book and you can't write, there's always going to be someone looking for an artist. But the best relationships come from building a peer group. And you know, it's again the same, like if you're a writer and you're looking for an artist, you don't go ask Becky Cloonan if she wants to draw a book with you. You make friends who are your level, who are working on their careers, who are striving towards the same goals as you are, and you work together. If you can pay them, definitely pay them. But if you can't, come to a place where, you know, you are making a thing together and you have agreed on a set goal together. And in order to do that, you do things like what Dave does of write stories specifically for that person. You don't come with a finished script and say, hey, I wrote this thing. It's my story. It's what I want to tell. Can you just draw it? You come saying, I want to make something together. Tell me your ideas. What do you want to draw? I want to make a thing with you. I want it to be ours. And that's how you really convince someone that the project is worth it. Because the 3 rules of making art, accepting jobs as an illustrator are, does it pay well? Is it like amazing exposure? And that's only for like the highest of high exposure. If someone comes to you and says, do this for exposure, say no. And the third one is it something you really care about? You can pick 2, no less than 2. And, you know, that's the rule. So you got to make it worth their while in some way.
I like that. And then we're just about out of time, but I want to see if I can get a quick answer for this last Q&A. Any advice on packing more story into short mini comics and making them work?
That's hard. Dave.
Yeah, man, compression. Don't
Really
put double page spreads in there. I mean, all the comics that I did with everybody for Action Hospital, they're all 8-page stories, beginning, middle, and end. And yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's harder to tell a good 8-page story than it is to tell a good 22-page story. I would almost like read, if you're struggling with that kind of stuff, I would read Future Shocks, like, you know, 2000 AD, the 3-page comics that they do, Future Shocks, because it's like you set up a premise and then you have a twist in 3 pages. And if you can write a good Future Shock, you can write a good 8-pager. If you can write a good 8-pager, you can write a good 22. If you can write a good 22, you can write a good 6-issue miniseries.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I just finished a book last year that was supposed to be a 20-page breather break from, well, this is longer ago actually, from Batgirl, and it is now 94 pages. So, you know, it's hard. It's really hard.
And then last but not least, I want to give you all a chance to promote things. So I know you both have a book handy. You have Forest Hills Bootleg Society. So if you want to show that off, and then if you want to tell people where they can find you online, on social media, if they want to connect, go ahead. I'll leave it up to you. Promote yourselves.
Yeah, our book, Forest Hills Bootleg Society, comes out tomorrow. Bookstores, comic book stores everywhere, both hardcover and soft cover, 220 pages. Oh my God, what? Such a value.
With the end page count. Oh my God, we don't have page numbers. Never mind. There's extra stuff in the back. So what I was trying to say.
Stuff in the back. There's, you know, it's a big long story. If you like things like Ghost World, this one, Summer, Skim, you'll probably like our book because it's all those things, but also there's more anime and more crying. Also, Everyone is Tulip and Fuck Off Squad, also available everywhere. Also, right now, I'm self-publishing this book, Halloween Boy. So if you want Halloween Boy, you can come to my website, check it out. We've got lots of books. Never stop, never stopping, right? Isn't that what they say?
Yeah. And you can find me at my website is just my name, NicoleGoux.com. Dave is heydavebaker.com, and we are both on all the socials. fairly findable, mostly at your X Dave Baker X on everything, right? And I am a bunch of other weird things that are all variations of my name. And Goux for Instagram, just Nicole Goux for Twitter and TikTok.
And it's spelled Goux because it's French.
It is spelled Goux, but I'm hoping it says that at the bottom. Does it say my name on the thing?
It does, yes.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. This was great. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. This was great.
Of course. So to all of our listeners, thank you for being here, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. Stay posted on Negative Space's website, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.